Welcome all. I pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. Also acknowledge many senior officials and ambassadors. I see Darius, Lithuania's ambassador to Australia. Welcome. I'm Justin Bassey, the head of ASPI. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome back to ASPI General Charles Flynn, currently Senior Advisor at Palantir, and it's with thanks to Palantir and Mike Kerrigan for bringing Charlie to us, following a distinguished career in the US Army, including most recently as Commander of US Army Pacific from 2021 to 2024. With war in Europe, conflict in the Middle East and rising tensions in our own region, there are few more experienced people who can talk with us about military strategy, the use of technology in deterrence and conflict, and why land power is still relevant in the modern era. Charlie has just about seen it all through his career, from the end of the Cold War to the war on terror, to technological competition, China's rise and the creation of AUKUS, and the return of state-on-state conflict. As Charlie put so well in his final Land Pact speech in Honolulu in 2024, with war in Europe and the Middle East, the last thing humanity can afford is another war. So the question is, how do we avoid another war? Charlie said in that speech, we maintain deterrence against any would-be aggressor and against those such as the Chinese Communist Party, Russia and the DPRK, who seek to upend the existing order for the benefit of only themselves. Deterrence, of course, is hard to maintain, as seen in Europe's hot war, but also with the rising levels of hybrid warfare that at times seem simultaneously unseen and overwhelming. So what does deterrence look like? Charlie's emphasis on alliances and partnerships is crucial. He said, we marshal our collective strength for the greater good because it allows us to respond as one in times of crisis, to demonstrate respect for sovereignty, to uphold our shared vision for a safe, stable and secure Indo-Pacific. In my view, too often in the Indo-Pacific, there is a false equivalence expressed about the great powers, an incorrect perception about a choice between the US and China. Charlie's own words on this provide, in my view, an important insight for our region when he said, I'm not forcing anyone to make a choice, but what I am asking is to help ensure your nation has the right to choose. This is what underwrites self-determination, respect for sovereignty, and a shared vision for the future. Our armies exist not to conquer, rather our armies exist to defend. This is not the case for those harbouring ambitions of conquest, those using coercion, intimidation, and threats as their primary means. By contrast, we help each other defend against those methods. That distinction is vital to maintain in both rhetoric and practice. A US alliance network of friends designed to use security only to maintain our freedoms, while authoritarian regimes constrain freedoms to maintain their own political security. It's why partnerships like AUKUS, the Quad, the Squad, are so important not only for the nations within the partnerships, but our region as a whole. And to discuss all these issues and more, it's my pleasure to hand over to Mike Hughes. He's our ASPI's Director of Defence Strategy and one of Australia's foremost experts on the Pacific. I'm sure it will be an absolutely engaging conversation. Mike, over to you.
Justin and General Flynn, Charlie, welcome to ASPI.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here. Great
thanks
to be
very
back.
much for your time. Thank you. Just so the audience is aware, what Charlie and I will talk about for roughly the next hour, the sort of three interlocking pillars of Indo-Pacific resilience and deterrence, those being military strategy, technology, and finally trust. So I have a number of questions. We'll have a conversation. Please be comfortable, but your time will come. When we get towards the end of that chat, I will throw to the audience. We will be inviting questions from the audience, so please get ready. Ambassador, I know you're ready to go. I saw your list of questions earlier, so you are competing tonight, so get ready. Charlie, again, thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you here. Just touching first on the first pillar of military strategy, the Indo-Pacific, often described as a maritime theatre. Obviously, when we think about World War II, most people are picturing, battles like Midway, the Coral Sea, perhaps not so much the fight in Guadalcanal and other areas. Is that characterisation of the region as predominantly a maritime domain, is that erroneous? And a second part to that question, what is often missed about the contribution that land forces make to the military picture in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, I actually think it is a misperception, and so I think oftentimes you look at the map and you see a lot of blue, and you forget about the land, and you forget about the people, the humans that are living on that land. So, in fact, it's described as a maritime domain, and I'm not going to discount the importance of both the air lanes and the sea lanes that basically keep commerce moving across the globe. But I will also tell you that the region is defined by its armies, at least in the military. So a couple of facts to back this up. I'll just walk across the region. I'll start out in the outer reaches of it. But 80% of the military in India is its army. 75% Indonesia, 80% in Thailand, 80 to 85% in Vietnam. The Philippines actually has more divisions than the U.S. Army. They have 12 divisions. 70% of its military is its army. Taiwan, 80% of its military is its army. Japan, 65%, South Korea, 65%. My point is that they don't have big air forces and navies, which is why the United States Navy and Air Force is so important to keep the global commons open. But you cannot discount the size of the armies in this region. It is actually, I say the land power network is actually the security architecture that binds the region together. Why? Because the countries largely turn to their armies to defend their borders, protect their territorial integrity, and look after their national sovereignty. And so that element is brought together, in my view, in large measure by the United States Army of the Pacific. Many don't realize that 30% of the U.S. Army is assigned to U.S. Army Pacific, and that doesn't count the Guard and Reserves that come out to augment them. And so when you add the United States Army of the Pacific, you add Special Operations Forces, you add Marine Corps forces, and then you add the sizable land forces from within the region, that is a formidable combination of capabilities that can be brought to bear in each one of these countries that you can't discount. So I don't prescribe to the notion that the Indo-Pacific is a maritime theater or an air and maritime theater. What I say is it's a joint theater. In fact, it's a joint and multinational theater. It's got joint and multinational problems, and it's only going to be solved by joint and multinational forces. And a key element of that joint and multinational combination of forces are land forces, and they should not be discounted. And moreover, historically, they played an enormously important role out here. In the Second World War, there were 6 Army corps out here and 22 divisions, okay? And there were 6 Marine divisions. So in large measure, I know the lore is that, the Marines won every battle out here. That's just not the case. The case is that the U.S. Army played an enormously important role. Last point on this, and I just wrote a note to somebody the other day. If you've been to the American Cemetery in Manila, there are more than 17,000 crosses in there. That's almost double the amount that's in Normandy. It's just it's a sight to behold, and there's many in the United States military that just have no idea of the size of that cemetery in Manila. But it is stunning to see, and it's a reminder of the profound loss and blood and treasure that was expended out here in the Second World War. And so the last thing we need to have is another repeat of that. And so. Yeah, happy to talk about that. I'm passionate about it because we have to dispel some rumors.
Absolutely,
And
thanks.
that's my way of doing it.
No, thanks, Charlie. That's great and a great start. Not just because I'm a former army brat, so thank you for that message. But I think where you just finished up there was a useful segue to my next question, which is in considering military power and its application, what role does military power play in the region towards deterrence?
Well, I'll start by describing what I think has happened certainly over the last 10 plus years with the Chinese military, but there's some other things that are occurring even now with the war in Europe with Ukraine and Russia. So, first of all, the A2AD arsenal that the Chinese have built is a juggernaut. And size does matter. And primarily, it's designed to defeat our strengths in the air and maritime domain. And then secondarily, it's designed to deny, degrade, and disrupt our cyber and space capabilities. Notice it's not designed to find, fix, and finish or target distributed land forces that are mobile, networked, reloadable. They're distributed, dispersed. That is not what the Chinese have created. And so what I've been advocating is that by actually introducing the land power network into key terrain with command and control, protection capabilities to include integrated air and missile defense, sustainment, and collection being terrestrial collection, human collection, tie that to the aerial layer, tie that to the space layer, and from positional advantage forward in the region by having more robust command and control, more protection capabilities, more collection capabilities, and sustainment, that we in fact can deny terrain, gain positional advantage, take time and space away from their decision making, and basically sow doubt and feed their paranoia. And now I'm specifically talking about China, that they can't actually pull off what they are saying they intend to do. One other point I'm going to make here is, and I had a couple of arguments with some, so-called experts on this. But the Chinese Navy is not the center of gravity. You can't invade Taiwan unless you can generate an invasion force. You can't seize, hold, and subjugate the people of Taiwan unless you can generate an invasion force. Last time I looked, the Chinese Navy and the Chinese Air Force cannot invade Taiwan. You have to generate that force, you have to mobilize it, you have to move it, you have to combat configure it, you have to combat load it, and then you have to cross the Taiwan Straits. And arguably, the last time we pulled off a successful operation in doing that was the Incheon landing in the Korean War. So if you want to talk about the single most complex operation that a military force, a joint military force, has got to conduct, it's a combined amphibious, air, and all-domain invasion of another piece of terrain across, I'll call it a 100-mile strip of ocean. So in my view, having forces with capabilities, and I always describe sort of multinational joint combined deterrence is the sum of these four parts. It's capabilities, it's posture, it's messaging what you intend to do, and then it's will, both military will and political will to actually get forward, get in position, and take decision space away from your adversary. We've been doing that for years in Korea, and I would say that it has taken decision space away from North Korea and China, but now we have a different problem out here with the size of what the Chinese have created, and the way that they are exercising and training and trying to work on improving their force.
Absolutely, and we'll come back later to questions later about where we think China might be at in its progress on that front. I think you've already touched on a concept for forward deployed elements, and again I'll have a couple more questions for you when we get onto the technology phase. I'm just trying to be friendly to the audience to give you a heads up about where you should be thinking and directing your questions when we get to the end of this chat. But I guess in just wrapping up the military strategy component, Charlie, and I realise this next question we could talk for a long time about this, but in terms of I guess the key focus on deterrence being real in the Indo-Pacific being about China. Mm-hmm. There are those commentators who seem to lean towards if deterrence fails and we're in a conflict with China, that it's likely to be a short, sharp event. Yeah. There are those, I'd include myself in the latter category, who would argue actually no, we're probably in for a long haul, the likes of which we probably haven't seen since the Second World War. Yep. And likely worse. Where do you sort of fit on that spectrum of possibilities that if deterrence does fail, what sort of war are we likely to be encountering here in the Indo-Pacific?
So I'm not going to sit up here and give you a debate on scenarios. I'm going to describe it how I see this unfolding. First of all, I don't think there's any historical precedence to a short, sharp war. I mean, I don't see that in today's age. In my view, I think there's going to be this is going to be a longer conflict. That's not to say that we should not work to win the first battle. We have to win the first battle or win the first round. Now, I would also tell you, given my last description of capability, posture, messaging, and will being like the sum of those parts creates endurance, and having positional advantage with our allies and partners out here in forward positions, with U.S. Commitment to the greater stability of the region. I would also tell you that having hard power forward with a sustainable posture gives you the ability to go 15 rounds. And so if you have the operational endurance and you're demonstrating that endurance by bringing all of your forces together and you message and you demonstrate the will, the collective will to be able to go the distance, in my view, that is also additive to deterrence. Because if they do want this to get over quickly, then what you're demonstrating to them is that you can increase the pain level on them by being able to go beyond the first battle. So again, I'm not of the view that this is going to end quickly. As I said to you earlier, the single most complex operation that a military force can conduct, in my view, is what they would say this cross-strait invasion, because that is going to take a hell of a lot of practice. It's going to take an enormous amount of proficiency, and it's going to take some will and staying power and risk on their part. And in my view, we can prevent that from happening by being in the right position with the right capabilities, by messaging that we intend to go the distance, and then demonstrating both the will of the military forces forward operating, but also the political will to be in those positions to be able to say, we're not going to have this happen today because we have the forces in position to be able to do this. And I'm going to point out a couple of examples. The fact that I have seen in my time out here an increase in multinational participation in exercises with joint forces, to me, that's an indicator that the unity and collective commitment of the nations out here is improving. When I see advanced capabilities being employed and used in the region, that is also a demonstration of those capabilities that we're talking about. So let me give you a couple of examples. Type 18 and Type 22 missiles from Japan, BrahMos missiles from the Philippines, HIMARS missiles, mid-range capable, the Typhoon, SM-6 and Tomahawk capabilities, advanced intel collection capabilities, advanced air capabilities, advanced sub capabilities, electronic warfare. The point I'm making is these things are happening in real time. They're happening right now, and all of these create, in my view, the hard power forward position that we have to have in order to prevent the insidious, irresponsible, and incremental approach that the Chinese have been taking out here. And so we have to win the first fight, but we have to be built for a 15-round match.
Right, and a bonus question on the back of that, I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate our collective efforts in that at the moment?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, there's always going to be work to do. I'd say, we're in the 6 category because I'm never going to be satisfied with, not having enough forward. I mean, I think that all of us could do a better job of distributed materials, parts, depot maintenance, fuel, ammunition, bringing industry forward. So let me sort of capitalize on this particular point. I'll use our relationship with Australia. So when you are sharing like platforms, pick a service, it doesn't really matter. That is also an incentive for industry to come forward and be able to have maintenance, manufacturing, additive manufacturing, and be able to do, I'll say, fixed forward operations. And so when we have capabilities that, like we do, that are the same platforms, and that's very, very true with our relationship here with Australia, then that helps. It helps shorten our lines of communication. It helps with being able to fix forward, and it's a stance on interoperability from the human, technical, and procedural types of interoperability that is, you just can't match that. In fact, I was just having a conversation. Australia just finished a exercise that I think they're only in their second year in the Philippines. Well, when you have equipment in the Philippines, and U.S. Army has 3 million square feet that they lease in Manila, in Aguila Harbor, and we store equipment in there, and we exchange parts. Well, when you have like platforms in there, if they get broken, well, we have parts there that we can share with one another and that helps Australia, it helps the United States, and it certainly helps us by having, again, capability, posture, and messaging forward by being able to demonstrate those kinds of capabilities.
Excellent, thank you. We're now going to move on to the second pillar, where we're talking about technology as a strategic enabler, and again, particularly focused on multi-domain operations within the Indo-Pacific. There's obviously a range of technologies to choose from, but really at the moment, I guess, focusing on data and AI, the transformational processes that are now in place, the centrality that they have to a commander's decision making, not just in terms of collecting the data needed, but the ability to process that data in real time to enable effective decision making. In your experience, what are the areas that you observe where that is I guess, most transformational and having greatest effect at the moment?
Yeah, so I think I think that new concepts are born, and new concepts are really important because testing those concepts are part of your planning effort as a commander, really at any level. So introducing new capabilities and new technologies force you to change your organizations. And so I'll give you an example. Back in the 2018-19 timeframe, we were, in the U.S. Army, we were on a path to bring in hypersonic missiles, bring in mid-range capable land-based SM-6 Tomahawk, and then a whole range of other intelligence capabilities, Titan, watercraft, and what we discovered was, so if the bent metal is going to come off the factory lines in 4 years, 5 years, if we don't reorganize or create an organization that can absorb these new capabilities, we're going to give a hypersonic missile or a land-based SM-6 or Tomahawk to a legacy organization. And we knew that that was a loser. So as a result of that, that really birthed the multi-domain task forces, or what we know now as the multi-domain task forces. And what I'm pointing out is that when we did that, we actually organized it, put a one-star general in charge of it, and we put it out at Joint Base Lewis-McChord and pointed it towards the Pacific, and it gave the organizational change a 3-year head start, right? Because then we didn't start really getting the bent metal, the delivery of the new capabilities, until about 22 or 23. And the lesson that I take from that was there were so many capabilities that were given to us in the Middle East during the, I'll just say, the global war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq, that we would get new capabilities and you give it to an organization that didn't have, it wasn't organized to use those capabilities. They basically sat in a footlocker. So I'm very appreciative of getting an organizational change in front of the bent metal, the new capabilities. And the glue that brings all this together is the technologies. So new capabilities, new organizations require you to insert, inject, experiment, and exercise at the same time with new technologies. And one of those that I think is so vital to what you're seeing right now is artificial intelligence. And by the way, I'm going to make a plug here on AUKUS Pillar 2. All the oxygen in the room is always on AUKUS Pillar 1, and subs and nukes. But people forget about AUKUS Pillar 2, AI, machine learning, quantum computing, robotics, unmanned systems. This, in fact, I can remember saying this years ago, this, in fact, is where we have the greatest overlap already, and we should advance very quickly on AUKUS Pillar 2, because the UK, Australia, and the United States already have a lot of interoperability and a lot of agreements where these things can make great gains very quickly. So that, to me, is a plug that, hey, if we're looking at, cost and we're looking at timing, what delivers the fastest and what improves our forces, in the near term, I would tell you that there's a lot in AUKUS Pillar 2 that would improve not just those 3 countries, but it would also give an advantage in the region to all the multinational forces and the joint combined effort that is ongoing out here. So all that to say, I'm very high on AI tools, large language models. In the case for Palantir, Maven Smart Systems, and actually, so there's a really good example. In 2022, there were some other systems that were being, I'll say, sort of politely, trying to be jammed down my throat as a commander. And we actually deployed, the Army, U.S. Army Pacific, deployed Maven Smart Systems from Palantir in exercise Yamasakura in 2022 in Japan. And that was just a short, 4 years ago. And now look at, where that is, because it's being used pretty widely. It was just demonstrated here recently during Talisman Sabre. in Australia, and of course, a number of countries in the region are beginning to use it, and of course, the U.S. military is NATO just signed an agreement over in Europe. It's been long used in the Middle East, but the fact of the matter is that AI commander decision advantage tool is so very, very helpful in today's environment where you want to be able to anticipate, you want to be able to war game, you want to be able to plan, and you want to be able to target, and you want to be able to do that on a common platform and to be able to share that across the services, across the joint force, but also across countries where we have intel sharing agreements. And so that work together with Australia here in the region is incredibly important.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Charlie. Now, this is a final warning to the audience. We're now moving to the final pillar to talk about trust. So I will soon come to you for questions. So get your hands ready to be raised. So, Charlie, third pillar, trust and the role it plays in deterrence. So, moving away from technology, from strategy, from hard-end capability, trust and I guess resilience play a fundamental role, both between countries, within societies, within and between institutions. How do you see trust playing out in building deterrence? And in your experience, what is it that countries need to do to continue to build trust, to make deterrence and operational effectiveness as good as they can be? And I guess for me personally, unfortunately, we've just narrowly missed signing a bilateral treaty, which would be an alliance with our closest neighbour, Papua New Guinea. So for Indo-Pacific, for the Indo-Pacific community who are invested in deterrence, what sort of insights would you like to share?
Well, I think it's a very simple one. I used to describe, I think a skill that we have to have, and I'll say, from a U.S. standpoint, is we need to listen to the region. We need to listen to the partners. We need to hear what they're saying, and we need to be aware of the challenges that are facing them, all of them. So now, how do you achieve that? I mean, I think the human interaction between commanders. I think that being present and being out here, although I'm not going to kid you, it takes a hefty lift to be here and spend the time, but you have to do that, and you have to create those experiences and those bonds between leaders. And I will tell you, it happens at the unit level, and that's why it's so important to be on the ground in these countries and sharing hardships with one another and doing the training, because the experiences that your men and women in uniform gain by being inside of the countries and learning from one another, that's where countries come together. And again, I'm going to make a plug for land forces here. If you want to understand what's going on inside of a country, you can't get that from flying over it and sailing by it, but you can get that by being in the interior and being out in each one of the districts, seeing the people, working with the Army, working with the police forces, working with the local communities. And yes, we're doing training. We're shooting munitions, we're firing artillery, we're dropping bombs, we're doing what soldiers do and why soldiers in every country went into the military. But at the same time, we're also doing exercise-related construction. We're fixing bridges, we're fixing roads, we're helping improve some of the bases that some of these countries are at. There's peacekeeping operations that are going on as part of the exercise. There's humanitarian assistance, disaster relief aspects of each one of the exercises. So it's not just, going out there and shooting a bunch of ordnance and doing lethal actions. It's also a range of military activities that are going on. One of the things that we began to do was we would have like a larger joint exercise that was going on, but we would stay on the front end and the back end of that exercise and do an army-to-army exercise. Why? And this is true in the case of Australia, but it's true in the case of all Army forces. The most expensive thing, at least for U.S. Army Pacific, to do out here was actually to get here and then to go back. It was the transportation. So I was trying to find creative ways to actually stay on the ground longer. And there was really two benefits from it. One, it was cheaper, but two, it allowed us to build a relationship and to understand the security environment in each one of the countries. And I think that is a really important part of the human dimension that sometimes is overlooked in the creation of trust between units, between formations, between armies, between countries. And there's so many other aspects. I'll give you one other statistic that I think is really important for out here. In the United States, we have this program that is run, it's a Department of State program, but it's run in conjunction with the Department of Defense, but it's called IMET, International Military Education and Training. In fact, there's an officer in the back of this conference room here today who used to be on my staff. 65% of all the seats in education facilities in the United States are Army seats. Those are Army schools. Why? Because we have the most schools. Well, that is a really important fit out here in Asia for what I spoke about in the early part of this session, which was the size of the armies. Many of these leaders in this region have been to a course in the United States at the artillery school, the infantry school, the signal school, the armor school, or they've been to the Command and General Staff College, or they've been to a war college. And that experience is additive to this element of trust in the region. And so it is an essential part of our operations. It's an essential part of creating a stable and prosperous region. And in my view, it is the great counterweight that we have against China is, I'll say, the strategic land power network of humans coming together in their militaries with the same aspirations, which is we want security out here in this region. We want you and your country to be secure. And what is it that we can do to help you and be additive to creating the conditions where you can defend your territorial integrity and protect your national sovereignty? And if there's some way that the United States and the United States military can help do that, then one of the greatest things that we add to that is this element of trust. And I think it's just an imperative to our success out here. And I don't mean U.S. success. What I mean is the region's success.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charlie. I think there's a lot there that will resonate with many people in the room. And, great to see that even though, of course, we are talking about the impact of technology on the way we do business, the core value of human-to-human interaction still shines through clearly there. Final question for you before we go to the audience. We are living in an increasingly contested region where coercion has really come to the fore, and particularly in the last decade. But you did highlight earlier, of course, that we have a country such as North Korea that has spent pretty much the last 75 years routinely threatening South Korea with everything from military action to nuclear annihilation. Mm-hmm. It's become so common that people just don't even notice North Korea saying this now. Yeah. But of course, more recently, the Chinese Communist Party has really stepped up, and again, particularly in the last decade, although it has been employing military coercion for a number of decades, whether we're talking about routine violations of airspace around South Korea and Japan. Obviously, Taiwan is under daily assault from routine military coercion. South China Sea claimants, even India, which just under 5 years ago experienced the loss of dozens of soldiers on its border with China as a result of a military incident. In that environment of increasing coercion, I haven't even mentioned political or economic coercion, just talking about military coercion. If we project, say, 10 years from now, and we would like our deterrence to be successful. We would like the region to be peaceful and stable and not a victim to such coercion. What is it that we need collectively to be doing now to make sure that we get to that place where we want to be in 10 years' time, where coercion has not been effective?
Well, in the near term, because I think the aggressive, irresponsible, and insidious and incremental, and I say those three I's deliberately, approach that the Chinese have taken out here, there is no substitute for hard power forward. So I think that we're in a place where, and what I mean by that is a combination of capability, posture, messaging, and will. Like that positional advantage of being in the region and working as a joint, combined, and multinational force, that is vital, in my view, to deterring the irresponsible behaviors. So you're asking me, what does that look like over the next 10 years? I would tell you, I'm not, I don't have a magic wand and know exactly what's going to happen in 27. All I can tell you is, and I said this, we have to take them for their word. That's what they've stated, be prepared by 27. Therefore, from a military instrument standpoint, when you're wearing a uniform, you get up every day, and when you get up, you think about, well, if that military instrument were to go off today, where am I? What am I doing in order to counter that? And am I in the right position to be able to offer options, not just to myself, but to my boss and my boss's boss? And so I don't think there's any substitute in the near term for continuing to increase our multinational participation, improve the capabilities that are being brought forward by all of our forces, bring forward new technologies, and then reform and look at new organizations that, again, create dilemmas for our adversaries here. It's not lost on me, and it shouldn't be lost on you, that in just my time between 21 and November of 24 when I changed, I mean, the activity along the line of actual control in India by the PLA, they effectively moved at least 2 corps of Army in and out of there. Maybe more dangerously, they built rail and road and heliports and surface-to-air missile sites. And then they were moving units out of there. And then when you think about what's going on in Burma, what's happening in Bangladesh, what just happened up in Nepal, the stress along the Laos-Thai border, South Asia is an area we need to continue to pay attention to. You have the problems that you have up in Northeast Asia with North Korea. One of the things that I think we need to pay particular attention to is, I remember I was given a think tank talk back later last year. I think it was like October, just before I changed command. And I mentioned then that North Korea had just deployed 12,000 soldiers into Europe and Ukraine. And the media was like, we hadn't heard about this. I said, well, you need to pay attention to the media out in Asia because that's where they're at. And I said, but that's not the most dangerous part. At that point, they had already sent equipment and ammunition. Now they were sending forces, and one of the things that I get, and I was concerned about, I remain concerned about, is the tech transfer. So now North Korea, not only, and China for that matter, now they have a live battlefield where they're learning things. And they're learning things not just with their people that are forward, but they're learning about their equipment. They're learning about their lines of communication. They're learning about their endurance. And maybe, the worst is the technology transfer that's going on between Russia, China, and North Korea is a very, very dangerous element that we need to pay particular attention to out here. So if you take what is happening in South Asia, if you take what the Chinese military did along the line of actual control, if you look at what North Korea is doing, I'll say in coordination or collaboration anyways with China and Russia, that is a dangerous combination of events that are going on here. Never mind the pressure that's going on across the Taiwan Strait with Taiwan and Japan and the Philippines, but also us down here right now, you all down here on the continent of Australia, they are penetrating the near abroad. And they're penetrating around the periphery of your homeland. So nobody's out of reach right now. And we all need to be thinking about creating conditions out here to get in a position to demonstrate that we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. And then, then diplomats need to do what diplomats do. Politicians need to do what politicians do. Economic decision makers need to do what they need to do. But from a military standpoint, I think the unity and collective commitment of this region by being in the right position with the right capabilities and messaging that we are not going to tolerate this kind of behavior is a really, really important part of deterrence. And I think we all need to get a little bit stiff in the back on making sure that that kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated, and it's not going to be, and we're going to call it out. We're going to call it out for what it is. I'll end by saying, when I came out as a 2-star general in 2014 as a division commander, everybody was upset at them building islands. And we said, don't do that. And they built them anyways. And then we said, don't put infrastructure on those islands. And they put infrastructure, and they said, and we said, don't do that, but they did. And then we said, don't arm those islands. And we said, shame on you, you shouldn't have armed that island. But they didn't stop. So they built them, they put infrastructure on them, and then they armed them. So we shouldn't be surprised when we ask them to not do something and they do it. And so I don't have any examples of them being honest about what they are doing. And so I know that, to include my own country, we have an economic relationship with them as well. But we also have a country that has a $37 trillion debt. But we're also a country that for every $3 spent in the globe, one is spent by an American. And so those things are going to be resolved by political leaders. But on the military side, I think our efforts together out here are incredibly important on being able to create conditions where everyone's freedom, everyone's prosperity is stable, secure, and safe. And we can only do that by being unified and creating conditions through our collective commitment that we're not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. So those are my views, and I guess I'm happy to. Are we going into questions now, Mike?
We will be going into questions. Charlie, that's fantastic. Great to get your views on those. That's what tonight's all about, so thank you very much. One final comment from me. Really appreciate you highlighting that, I guess, the operationalisation of that triumvirate relationship between China, Russia and North Korea. As a former North Korean analyst, we know very well that the North Korean nuclear program wouldn't exist if not for Russian assistance and China's complicity. And I think we should all be concerned, including I know our European partners are, about how that relationship is now manifesting in Ukraine on the European front as well. So, Charlie, again, thank you very much for your comments. I'm now going to, we've got time for about 2 or 3 questions, noting, of course, that we do have a networking event after this, and there will be snacks and drinks. But I'm going to go to Ambassador Yu first. Just we have people with microphones in the audience. For anyone else, please put your hand up, and I'll start ranking you in order as we move through. And please, if you could introduce yourselves, note your affiliation for Charlie, and try and keep your questions short if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Lithuania's Ambassador Darius Agutis. So, well, thanks a lot. Fascinating speech, fascinating discussion. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Well, allow me to shift, as you had correctly mentioned, to our part of the world, Europe, if that would be all right with you. I know that you're retired, so maybe you'll be able to talk a little bit wider in the sense. Well, as you know, for the last 21 years, Lithuania is a member of NATO. In 2023, Lithuania hosted NATO summit. But in Lithuania, we do have approximately 1,000-kilometer border with Belarus and Russia, its largest military base in Europe, Kaliningrad exclave. At the same time, we are one of the best NATO allies in our defense commitment. We invest 5% of GDP to our defense, next year 5.5%.
Yep.
We do have a compulsory military service in Lithuania. We do have 1,000 US servicemen in Lithuania as well. We are, of course, members of European Union, but our largest strategic partner always was, is, and will be United States. 2 weeks ago, we learned that Pentagon initiated to cut military funds approximately $220 million to the Baltic states. This is an important signal to Russia. This week, US military representatives, 2 lieutenant colonels, together with officers from Turkey and Hungary, are observers in the Russian military exercise Zapad in Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a positive signal to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, allow me to ask if, in the light of the aggressive Russian attacks to Ukraine, Russia's deliberate sending of 19 drones to Poland a week ago, what is your reaction on the situation in Eastern Europe? Are we losing United States? Thank you.
Well, I'll just say, thanks, Ambassador, for the question. I will just say that in terms of decisions about resources or observers going to an exercise, that's a decision, that's a policy decision made. I think what I would say is that
It's a political.
if we're not talking, we're fighting. And that I think that the political leaders and the diplomatic leaders of every country ought to find ways to communicate so that discussions can occur and people can, and countries can get over the obstacles that are in the way of resolving whatever that dispute is. So it is unfortunate what has happened in Europe. The loss of life is extraordinary and terrible, and we have to find a way for it to end. So, I'm this is consistent, I think, with humanity, but it's certainly what I know President Trump talks about it often, publicly. But, starting wars are easy. Ending them are terribly, terribly hard. And then I would also say maintaining the peace is probably the most difficult of all the tasks. And then how it ends, I don't know. But I know that my read of history, the demilitarized zone that splits today North Korea and South Korea, and by the way, we're at an armistice. That war never ended. It's just a pause in the fighting. That wasn't created overnight. So the act of a ceasefire, or at least the the notion of a ceasefire, that's like where that's when the work just starts. Then you have to have a zone of separation. You know, I mean, I'm drifting a little bit from your question, but I guess what I'm saying is, if countries aren't talking, and they have really, really hard political, and in this case, political and military problems in front of them, then there is no way it's going to get resolved. So I am a fan of talking. And I'm a fan of talking to China. And there are communications channels that are opened up between a number of countries. And I think that that's a good thing, because when you're not talking, you're fighting. And we have a limited regional war going on in Europe. We have a limited regional war going on in the Middle East. The last thing we need is another limited regional war out here, because it won't be limited. It will be unlimited, and it'll be global. So, you know, I know that even from my remarks, some will say, well, by doing that, maybe you're instigating, maybe you're accelerating a crisis or conflict from happening. Well, in the interim, I don't have another solution militarily. My solution is that we have to gain positional advantage. We have to message that we're serious. We have to be prepared to go 15 rounds. And we have to demonstrate to our adversaries that their irresponsible behavior is not going to be tolerated anymore. There's already been enough irresponsible behavior that's happened in Europe, because that's why we have literally millions of people dead. And it's got to end somehow. I don't have the solution. I don't have an equation in front of me, but I know one thing: if we're not talking, then we're going to keep fighting. And so the political leaders and the diplomatic leaders need to find ways to get talking and resolve this. Otherwise, you know, more life is going to be lost, and more lives are going to be turned upside down, and humanity can't afford it anymore.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Ambassador, for the question. I am going to note to everyone that, well, one, I'm getting a warning that I'm keeping people from drinks. Two, I grant the ambassadorial privileges for the length of his question. We have room really for one more short question. Can I go? Sorry, go over that one. Go over there. All right, question here. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it is on. Adam Gastineau, Directorate of Net Assessment, Australian Department of Defence. What is the biggest threat that you see to our, broadly construed, not just Australia, ability to effect deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, particularly within the context of sort of those three pillars that you've just discussed?
The greatest threat?
Yes, sir.
To not being able to deter? I think that if we don't respond to the continued aggressive path that the Chinese have been demonstrating for the last decade, I think the incremental approach that they're taking, the scale, the complexity of the exercises with which they're conducting, I think that is a dangerous trajectory that they're on. I've said that publicly before. When I look back to what they were capable of doing in the 2014, 15, 16 timeframe, and I compare that to where they are today in 24, 25, that is a very, very dangerous path that they're on. So we have to find some way to slow that trajectory down, because if that 10-year window resulted in where they were and where they are today, if that continues on, that is not a good place to be as a region, because you don't build an A2AD juggernaut like they've built to simply sit idle on mainland China. That you have other intentions in the application of that Herculean amount of capability that they have. So I think that that we have to slow that trajectory down. And in my view, from a military standpoint, the way we slow that down is we sow doubt, we feed paranoia, and we get in position. And we do that in the near term so that we can prevent something from happening more long term.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. I know we've been keeping you talking for an hour, but I am going to slip one more question in from the back left before we break.
Yeah.
Thank you, General. Zach Smith, Head of Government Relations at Leidos Australia.
Okay.
I'd like to ask you, both as a recent commander and your comment about product being shoved down your throat was noted, but also your commentary about trust between commanders. What about trust between industry and commanders in both directions? What would your advice, both as a recent commander but as someone who is now seeing it from the industry side, be to build those networks of trust so that we can all continue to support and uplift each other?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm learning, in my new journey. But when I reflect back, I didn't like when I was a flag officer particularly, and I don't know if I was really exposed to this as a one-star general, but I did get a little more exposure as a 2 and a 3, and then somewhat as a 4. But I didn't like industry jamming things down your throat. Like, if you just use this, it'll solve all your problems. And so I think that, my advice is that come forward with, and now I'm talking from an industry standpoint, come forward with your capabilities, software, hardware, whatever it is. Let your product and the performance of your product speak for itself. And if it can do that, then commanders, and by the way, senior commanders are going to take a lot in from their subordinates that use it. And so the other aspect of this, I used to talk about this all the time, that every exercise needs to have an experiment, and every experiment needs to have an exercise. And this is where industry, it's a little bit of a cost for them because they got to come with something, and they may not have the confidence that it's going to result in business after that. But if you don't show up and demonstrate what you're saying you have, and the military commanders and the chain of command needs to make experiments available for them to bring these into exercises, then I think we're missing the mark as an integrated team from a military organization and industry trying to improve one another's organizational changes, advancements in capabilities, and then the technologies that are changing so rapidly that you have to bring them almost continually and let the formations learn and succeed or fail fast, so we know how to change things and get things done. One other comment on this, I think that also industry, particularly big companies, sometimes they'll overpromise and underdeliver and have delays, and that is maddening for commanders, because you simply don't have the time. And so when somebody says, hey, I'm going to deliver this in 22 or 23 or 24, there should be hell to pay if they don't deliver it in 22 or 23, 24. Now, I recognize that there are variables that happen, but it can't be like a continual excuse of reasons why, because, as a military leader, you expect them to anticipate those kinds of things, whether it's supply chain or workforce shortages or whatever the case may be. You have to be responsive to the customer, and if you're not going to be on time, because you can automatically know where I'm going next, because if you're not on time, you're also not on budget, because it's just going to cost you more. So I just think that we need to get We need to do a better job of having more experiments in our exercises, and industry we need to open the door up for them to bring those capabilities, and then industry is going to have to like put a foot forward and say, hey, this is a little risky because we don't necessarily have a guaranteed contract effort. So, but if you don't bring your ball, bat, and glove, I can't tell whether you're going to be a good player or not. So you got to show up and you got to be at the practice, and then we can figure out how to do it. And by the way, the best R&D they're going to get is they're going to get feedback from people that are using it. That is the single, you're not going to get that in the laboratory, you're going to get that out in a real experiment, in a real exercise with real soldiers in real time, giving you real feedback on whether the thing is actually working, whether it's doing what you're advertising it's doing, and what the commander or what the organization needs it to do. So thanks for that question.
Thank you. Charlie, fantastic insights. Thank you for spending time with us again tonight, sharing 4 decades of experience and wisdom, and again in an exceptionally frank manner, which is someone who's been posted to Washington, D.C., is an absolute characteristic of the Australia-US alliance. And again, audience, can you please join me in thanking Charlie for his time tonight?